secure.
Hi, this is Bob Jameson with CSM International. Welcome to episode 2 of the Data Sovereignty series. Your cloud provider tells you that your data is yours. I want you to read that contract, however, because what you'll find is yours is not what you think. In the last episode, we talked about data sovereignty as a question of physical and operational control, where your data actually lives and who can walk into the room that holds it. There's a second layer to sovereignty that almost no one checks, the contract, the actual legal language that defines what your cloud provider can do with your data, who else can access it, and under what conditions. Almost every business signs these agreements through a procurement process, not a legal review. Someone clicks accept, or a sales rep sends a standard order form, and the assumption is that your data, your control, is a settled fact because it's printed somewhere in the marketing material. It usually isn't settled. It's negotiated, defined, and limited in language most people never read. Let's separate three things that get casually treated as the same thing: ownership, access, and control. They're not the same, and the gap between them is where the real exposure lives. So first, ownership versus access. Most contracts will say that you retain ownership of your data, but ownership doesn't mean exclusive access. In the United States, a law called the Cloud Act allows law enforcement to compel a U.S.-based provider to produce the data they hold regardless of whether that data physically sits on a server inside the U.S. or on a server overseas. That single provision created a direct conflict with the European data protection law because it means a European company's data sitting on a server in Europe can still be reachable by a U.S. legal request if the provider is an American. This conflict became significant enough that Europe's highest court struck down a major U.S.-EU data transfer agreement specifically over concerns about U.S. government access. The gag order problem. In some legal requests, the provider receiving the request is legally barred from telling you that it happened. You can build your entire compliance posture around the assumption that you'd know if your data was being accessed by a third party, and in some circumstances, that assumption is simply false. Third element is terms that change without you. Service agreements are not static. Providers update the terms of service, and in recent years, a notable pattern has emerged. Several major software and cloud platforms have added clauses granting themselves rights to use the customer's data for training their own AI products. Often, the default is that you need to opt out rather than opt in. And this is buried in the updated terms that take effect automatically unless you actively object within a noticed window. If you are not the kind of organization that reviews every terms of service update, the moment it lands, you may have already granted your rights that you never consciously agreed to. So there's three implications. First one is for governments. Cross-border conflicts like the one between the Cloud Act and the European privacy law are not going away, they're intensifying. Expect more jurisdictions to pass data localization requirements specifically because they no longer trust that the contractual promises from a foreign headquartered provider is enough. The legal patchwork is going to keep getting more complicated, not less. For companies, if you operate across borders or you handle data for clients who do, you need to know whether your primary cloud and software vendors are subject to legal regimes that could put you in breach of your obligations to your own customers. And this is through no action of your own. That is a real compliance liability and is not covered by a service level agreement about uptime. And practically, every renewal cycle is a chance to actually read what changed in the terms. Most companies treat contract renewal as a procurement task. It should be treated as a recurring risk review. Lastly, for the future, the AI training rights clause trend is going to keep expanding because the data itself has become a direct input to a product that competes for the same budget that you're paying for the service. The incentive for the vendors is to quietly claim broader usage rights over your data, and it's not shrinking. It's the most valuable raw material in the industry right now. Here's the idea I want you to take from this. Yours is not a feeling, and a contract is a defined term, and the definition is whatever the actual language says, not whatever the marketing page implied. Sovereignty isn't only about where the physical server sits, it's also about which rights you actually retained on paper versus which rights you assumed you retained because the word yours appeared somewhere in the pitch deck. This is genuinely a business problem, not a technical one. The fix isn't a different piece of software, it's a discipline. Someone in your organization, legal, compliance, or leadership, actually needs to read the terms of service and the renewal language for every vendor that touches the data that you consider sensitive, and do it on a reoccurring schedule, not just at the moment of signing. That single habit will tell you more about your real data sovereignty posture than any security tool you could buy. If you want to understand what you're actually agreeing to, stay tuned. On the next episode, we're going to go over a framework that helps you understand what information is important and what information really isn't, and how you safeguard both. Until then, please subscribe.
System breach detected. Initializing defense protocols. Secure.